Hey guys, and welcome to this special video for Calibrite. My name is Frank Dorov. I'm a fashion and celebrity photographer from the Netherlands, and we are specialized in education. But most of all, I love to work with colors in my work. So today it's all about colors. So why are colors so important? Think about movies. Color evokes emotion, and movies are the best way to see this. Think about the very simple example of James Cameron in The Abyss. Now think about this, when you're so deep underwater and you are in a concrete bunker without any windows and you turn on a fluorescent tube or a tungsten light bulb, what is the color of that light? Exactly, the same color as it is on top. So why in that movie is everything tinted blue? The whole movie has that blue hue. Well, very simple, to give you the idea that you're underwater, and it works like a charm, right? And they do it all the time. Every movie you watch, one of the main mood makers is of course the music, but also the color. Think about Titanic, everything looks a little bit brown. Think about the Matrix, when you're in the Matrix, everything is just a very subtle tint of green. And when you're outside, well, you guessed it, it looks normal. So colors are very important. But colors are also important for something else. Think about when you order a red sweater from an online store and you order a red scarf from that same online store, and the colors look exactly the same. How often does it happen that when it comes in, the colors aren't the same? They're actually a little bit different? That's because they didn't use a calibrated workflow. So what is a calibrated workflow? In a calibrated workflow, it's important that you start out with something and that you end with something that looks exactly the same as where you started. That sounds easy, right? So we need some tools to make sure that that happens. The first tool I'm going to talk to you guys about is actually the color checker. Now in my work I'm using the Duo color checker, and this is a new one, and it's very important for us because we do video and photography. Now this is the photography part where you see all the squares and of course the white balance part, and the other side is actually for a video. So this is the video part where you can set your black point, your middle gray, and of course your white, and also the colors. Now, how does a color checker work? It's actually very simple. All those squares have certain coordinates in a color space. So what are those coordinates? Think about it as an X, an Y, and a big Y. Hue, saturation, and luminance. Now you have to realize that if you change one of those settings, it will influence the other one. See it as a puppet. If everything works together, the puppet dances. But if one of those strings get broken or isn't really the same length, the puppet will do weird stuff. And how weird depends on where you pull. And that's exactly what happens with calibration. We make sure that everything is nicely balanced. So when you shoot a color checker and you now know that all those coordinates work together, you also understand why it's really important to, for example, use a light meter, because you want to make sure that luminance is also the same when you do your calibration later in Lightroom for the color checker. So the color checker, how does it work? Let's jump into Lightroom and let's see how it works in Lightroom with the included plugin. Okay guys, let's first take a look at the color checker. Now I know this seems a little bit weird, but we pre-recorded this broadcast, so that means that I can show you the way that the color checker works before we do the photo shoot. So we shot two sets during the live shoot, set 1 and set 2. Now normally you have to make sure that the color checker is in the image like this, preferably even a little bit flatter than this. You can fill the frame with it. In the past you really had to, but nowadays this will work just fine. Now every time you change your lighting setup, especially when you change modifiers or strobes or situations like inside or outside, always make sure you shoot a new color checker. And creating the profile is super simple. Now of course you can do it easy. If you don't want to do anything with profiles, just go to develop, get your white balance picker and just click here. Colors will be okay. Get your white balance picker. Let's go for Adobe Color. Let's grab your white balance picker and let's do this. So this is the first thing you can do, but it's 100% for white balance, but it's not really the right colors. When you zoom in here, you can still see that it uses the Adobe colors, and we don't want that. So let's create that profile. Now, as soon as you install the software, there's also a Lightroom plugin you can install. And you can find it here. File, Export, and then go for the color checker camera calibration. Just give it a name. In this case, we are using an Hansel strobe with a rogue umbrella, and press Export. Okay, so it created the profile. The only thing you now have to do is quit a Lightroom, so press OK, quit a Lightroom and restart Lightroom. Okay, we're back in Lightroom, and now you might think that the profile is already activated, but it's not. Go here for those squares, press, and now go for profiles. And as you can see here, now we have the Hansel. Now look at the difference. If we go to Adobe Raw and we go through all these settings, let's zoom in on the color checker. We go through all these settings, you will see that they change, of course, black and white, Adobe Standard, Adobe Portrait, and now look at the blue squares. You see that with the Adobe calibration, it hardly changes. You see a little bit in brightness, you see a little bit in the black levels, but overall the colors, they change a little bit, but not a lot. Let's go for that Hansel one. Look at this. Now this is a huge difference. Let's activate this one and let's go for the other ones again. As you can see, small differences, but as soon as I let go, this is the real one. Okay, let's zoom out again. Press close. Now in this case, what I always do, even after calibration, is still use that color checker to get the proper white balance. And as you can see, it did change just a little bit. Okay, but if you did this once, do you need to do it again? Well, we are using Hansel strobes, and those strobes are very, very stable in the color temperature. But you're using different modifiers, you're using different backdrops. Maybe you use something that's a little bit reddish or a little bit green. That can all infect your image. So it's very important that whenever you change something, you do a new color checker. And of course we did too. So let's try it again. And let's see if there's a difference between the two. I'm first going to do white balance, File, Export, color checker, and then just name it Hansel with a strip light and grid, and Export. There we go. Same story, Lightroom quit. And start up again. Okay, there we go. Go for the second one. Go here. And of course, now we select the strip light with grid. Now let's zoom in on the color checker. And let's just switch between the two. Let me first, of course, do the proper white balance. One moment. So both should be 100% the same, right? And we are pretty close, I think. Let's look at the difference. There we go. There's a slight difference in the reds and magentas. But overall, we are pretty stable. And this is, of course, also because I'm using a light meter. So my luminance channel is always correct. Again, change it for the Adobes and you see a huge difference. Let's zoom out for skin tones. When I look at this, it looks okay, but it doesn't look 100% natural. When I go for these, there we go, this looks way better. But as you can see, look at the skin tones. There is a difference between those two modifiers. So make sure that whenever you change something, you always use the proper calibration file. So in this case, this is the strip light. So we change the strip light, and this one, that's the one with the umbrella. And now when I put them next to each other, they will look approximately the same, depending of course on the lighting and the backdrop, but at least the color checkers should be the same. So every time you change your lighting setup, also when you lower or raise the outputs of the strobe, I highly recommend, as soon as you're done and you're ready to shoot, shoot the color checker, and then you always know that you have the proper color balance and of course the proper colors. Again, this part is the color balance, a white balance, and this is the part where the calibration takes place. Okay, so again, it's a little bit weird that you already see the images with the color checker before we did the photo shoot, but we wanted to make it clear in the broadcast how everything works before we go into the studio. So that's why the order is a little bit weird. Okay, so next up is of course calibration of the monitor. So let's go back to the studio and I'll explain to you guys how to calibrate the monitor and why it's so important to calibrate your monitor if your client doesn't have a calibrated monitor. Now of course, using the color checker, that was easy, right, in Lightroom. Is it gonna get any harder? No, not at all. But when we have the camera correct, we also have to make sure that the monitor is correct, right? Because that's the device where we see our images on. That's the device that we actually have to calibrate to get the proper images. And that's where Calibrite also jumps in, of course. They have great calibration devices for your monitor, but also for your printer. Now today we're gonna not talk about the printer. We're just gonna focus on the monitor and of course the color checker. Now, for the monitor, it varies a little bit what kind of monitor you use. For example, we're using BenQ monitors, and BenQ has a hardware calibrating option. And that's one of my favorite parts about monitors, hardware calibration. It's just a little bit better than using software. But if you don't have a hardware calibrated monitor, don't worry at all. Calibrite got you covered there too. The Calibrite devices actually also work on the BenQ monitors and on some other devices, of course, but they also deliver their own software. Now let's take a look at the software and how I set up everything for our BenQ monitor if I don't use the hardware calibration, because this is what most of you guys will use. So let's jump into the software from the calibration and let's see how we calibrate our monitor with my favorite settings. Hey guys, and welcome to the calibration part. Maybe one of the most important things you can do to get your workflow perfectly. So we're working with Calibrite Profiler and I'm using a Color Checker Display Plus, as you can see here, active. And you can choose between basic or advanced. In my case, I'm just using advanced. And let me first talk about a little bit how often you should calibrate your monitor. In my case, I always advise to do it just before an important assignment. So if you want to make sure that your images look top-notch, do the calibration. It's a really simple process and it goes really fast. Now, do make sure that you first warm up your monitor for at least 20 minutes. I always advise 45, but 20 minutes is okay. And if you don't have an important job, at least do it once every 3 or 4 weeks. Again, it's a very simple process, and just set an alarm. You can set it in the software that after 4 weeks it will give you a pop-up like, hey, you have to calibrate your monitor. Don't click it away because the calibration is really important. Okay, I'm gonna take you through some settings and I'm gonna explain a little bit why I use those settings without getting too technical. I want to make it simple. So we selected our advanced monitor, we selected our Color Checker Plus. Let's go for next. And now you can choose your display. In my case, it's an Apple display. You can choose white LED, you can use white gamut, RGB, plasma, or whatever. In my case, I'm going to do the phosphor. You can do match for photo, pre-press, video, saved preset, or custom. Let's go for photo in this case. And let's go for next. Now, after this, it's incredibly simple. Just start measurement. But first, I want to take you through the settings. So the first setting on top here, we always choose D65 for photography. This is the D6500 Kelvin, and that's our white point. The luminance, this is a little bit personal. You can go for 100 CDM or for 120, or you can do something custom. Most of the time with my laptop, I will literally just put it on a native. And the reason for this is because you always change the output of your laptop. I just want to make sure that I don't mess up anything in the Apple. On the BenQ, I always choose 120 CDM. On the laptop, I will go for the setting that I like best, somewhere in the middle. And I don't know if that shows up on YouTube, but I just changed the brightness of the laptop to the middle. I leave it on native so it doesn't influence anything. Okay, then we go for, of course, our contrast ratio, also native instead of custom in this case. Gamma 2.2, and if you do a lot of video, you could consider 2.4, but in most cases just leave it on 2.2. Okay. Now this is the way that it meters, of course, the profile options. Ambient light adjust, I turn that off. I think that in a proper calibrated workflow, you should make sure that there's no light hitting your display. So I'm putting that on off. Flare correct, I'm just putting that on off also because I'm in a dark area. Chromatic adaptation, we just leave this all on default. Now this is the one that I find very interesting, and this is where a lot of people go wrong. the ICC profile version. Now, a lot of people will go like, hey, let's go, oh, max compatible, that's even better, or version 4. I found out that when you use Lightroom a lot and you go to Photoshop and you use a lot of plugins, on version 4 I can see a distinct difference in colors and also in brightness between what I do in Lightroom and what I do in Photoshop. When I go for version 2, everything disappears and it just looks perfect. So I highly recommend using version 2. And the way that you profile type, matrix based or table based, just leave it on default for now. If you really know what you're doing, you can change that stuff, but most of the time just leave it on default. Now, this one is also interesting. You can choose between the standard 118 patches, advanced 211 or advanced plus 461. For the sake of the video, let's do 211. Okay, press next. Okay, we're ready to take the measurements, so start our measurements. At this moment it will go to full screen and it will start asking you what kind of hardware controls do you have. In this case, let's say I have absolutely nothing, so we'll just leave it open because hey, it's a laptop, right? Continue. And you will see clear indications. This is what I love about the Calibrite software. You can go really in depth or you can just clickety-click and just go. But everything is really easily explained and you even see the position of the calibrator in the circle. So let's do that. I'm hanging my calibrator now in front of the screen and we press next. Now, during the calibration, I'm going to speed up the process a little bit because it is a little bit long, but let's start speeding up so you guys can see what's happening. Okay, we're done with the measurement and it's not that long, but hey, for a video, it's too long. Let's press next. And as you can see, this is a MacBook Pro. It looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but hey, this is really nice. Let's go for next. And as you can see here, I can now give it a name and a reminder. So let's do it in 4 weeks. Save. Now, of course, before this calibration, I also did a calibration like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is the cool thing. You can literally see a before and after. Like this was before and this is after. As you can see, my laptop was pretty good. So I actually don't see a real difference. So let's pick one with red, for example. That's the nice thing. They have a lot of different options to see a before and after. And in most cases, this difference is huge. If you never calibrated your monitor and you do this for the first time, you will probably drop from your seat and you will go like, wow, that's a huge difference. So you can see different options. And if you think like, hey, this is nice, but I want my own images in here, just press the plus and just upload one of your own. Okay, exit zoom. So we stored everything, everything is done, and you can still do a validation if you want. And you can, for example, see like, okay, is this really according to, is this what I want? But in this case, we just leave it for this and we can start the retouching process. But before we start retouching, we of course have to get images. So let's go into the studio with our model and let's shoot some cool images. Okay, calibration with the color checker. Easy, right, in Lightroom. And of course also the monitor, also very easy. But let's address the elephant in the room. Why should I calibrate my monitor if my client doesn't use a calibrated monitor? Let me first explain what happens during the calibration. We of course set the white point with red, green and blue. We call it the grayscale. We also set the gamma. This is how it works from the bottom part of the grayscale, the blacks, to the white parts of the grayscale, the top part. We also set the color management system, all those squares with all those colors. So everything is in balance. But one of the most important things during the calibration is setting that black and white point. So you make sure that you see all the detail in the shadows when retouching, but you also see all the details in the whites. And this is important because how many times does it happen that you see an image and you zoom in on the shadow details and you see a lot of sloppy photography work? Or you zoom into the highlights and you clearly see that it's not 100% white, but you see a little bit of gray everywhere. Well, probably the photographer didn't set up his monitor correct. So make sure you set that white point correctly and the black point. But there's more. The customer doesn't have a calibrated monitor, right? So why should you calibrate your monitor? Very simple. The customer is used to that monitor. He watches TV on it, he watches other photos on it, and he's used to how that image looks. So if you deliver images that are calibrated, the customer will just see it as normal, even if his monitor isn't calibrated. But if you deliver images that aren't calibrated, it could be that it's actually worse on the monitor from the client, depending on how worse that monitor is. And trust me, some monitors are really bad with clients. So make sure that your workflow is always calibrated, because then you have proper shadow detail, proper white detail, and proper colors. And whatever display you watch your images on, it will always look right. This is also very important when you shoot, for example, for, well, let's say an online shop. How often does it happen that you order a red sweater and a red scarf, you get them in, and they look totally different? You don't want that for your clients, right? So calibration helps with that problem. Now, enough talk about calibration. Let's go to the studio with our model and let's create some cool images with gels, colors, and of course I'm going to explain how to use the color checker when you're shooting with gels. Because, well, you have to take a little bit care when you use the color checker in that situation. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey guys, we're in the studio with our beautiful model Evelyn. And the first thing you have to do is, of course, make sure that you have the proper exposure. Now, for the proper exposure, we're using a light meter. Now, you always have to remember that the light meter we're using in the studio is actually an incident meter reading. So you don't point towards the light source, you actually hold it in front of the area you want correctly lit, and then you get the proper exposure. Now, you might wonder, hey Frank, when I look at your whole photo shoot, you always point towards the light source. That's actually correct, because we want that part of our model to be correctly lit. So in the studio, most of the time it looks like we're aiming towards the light source, but we're actually just holding it in front of the area we want correctly lit. So let's turn on the light meter, let's walk to our model, and let's do the meter reading. And that's 4.07, so that's 3/10 of an f-stop below 5.6. So let's go up, 1, 2, 3. Now we're at 5.6. Now the light source I'm using is actually an umbrella. Now an umbrella is one of the most easiest light sources to use, but also one of the most difficult ones. That's weird, right? Easy and difficult. If you know what you're doing with an umbrella, you can do a lot with it and it's very easy to use. But if you just start out with photography, an umbrella can be one of the most difficult things to control. So don't give up, just keep trying and you will love the umbrella. Now in this case we're using it from the side. I want a little bit, an instant of that Rembrandt lighting, but I also want some lighting on the backdrop. And by aiming the umbrella like this, I light both my model and the backdrop. Now for that Rembrandt lighting, it's very important that we have one dark side and a nice triangle. Later on, we're going to open that up, of course, with a nice blue gel. But first, let's do the color checker. Because when you work with gels, it's very important that you shoot the color checker without the gel. Also, when you do sunsets, don't use a color checker, because it will neutralize all the colors. And it doesn't look right, right? Because you want a sunset. So let's grab the color checker, let's take the shot, and then we are ready to shoot. Now, because we're doing photography, of course we're going to open up the photography side. That's the one with the white balance card and all the squares. It's not a makeup box, it's really some squares. The model has to hold it in front of her face and as close as possible to her face, because we want to make sure that we get the proper luminance. Remember what we talked about in the start? The luminance also determines the saturation. But it's also important that the light hits the color checker as flat as possible. So not under an angle, because then you get light fall off and you don't get a proper calibration. So let's grab our camera and let's make sure that we shoot it correctly. Aim it towards the light, please. The color checker. Yes, there we go. Zoom in on the color checker. And of course make a funny face, otherwise it won't work. There we go. Thank you so very much. And that's actually everything you need. This is the shot with the color checker. I always call it the most important shot of the whole photo shoot, because it determines if your colors look right. Okay, so we're ready for the photo shoot. First, let me show you how it looks without that blue gel. So we're gonna shoot our model. Well, I'm not gonna really shoot you, I'm gonna take a picture. Look into the light source, please, and center your eyes, so we don't have those Walking Dead eyes. Very nice. Look straight ahead. There we go. And center your eyes just a little bit more towards me, the eyes. Awesome, great. And as you can see, we have that really dark side. Now in this case, I really like it. And maybe you do too. I love that contrast in the image. So let's walk around a little bit and let's shoot it also from another angle. Like for example, from here. I really like this. Look a little bit down, like there. Perfect. And we also get a little bit of lens flare from the side. It just looks very, very nice. But what if you want a little bit more? Remember, color evokes emotion. And with this shot, I absolutely love to add a blue gel. So let's grab our blue gel and let's turn it on and let's have some fun. Okay, for the first shot, I'm just gonna do it straight on. Okay, look a little bit that way. Very nice. Love it. And it just gives me a little bit of extra motion in the shot. Or not really motion, but a little bit more emotion, sorry. As you can see here, we're now using that blue light also for the lens flare, but also to give a little bit of an accent on our model. And it really helps the shot in this case. So let's do the same thing from the side. Let's see how that looks. Nice. And as you can see from the side, it doesn't really work as nice as the other one. But what if I shoot it from the other angle? There we go. Now this looks a lot better. The only thing I want to ask my model is just tilt your head a little bit that way. Perfect. Eyes towards me. Nice. Okay, there we go. Look at this. This is really nice. Awesome. Can you do something with your other hand? For example, hold it here. Cool. And let's do the same thing from here. Slightly lower angle. Okay, love it. Now for the final shot, can you turn all the way around? And then when I say yes, turn around very violently and just shake your head and your hair. Are you ready? 1, 2, go. Okay, and turn the other way around. Okay, 1, 2, go. Nice, and a little bit more power in your turn. There we go, 1, 2, go. Nice, love it. Now when you turn, try to keep your hands like this, a little bit like a power move. Okay, 1, 2, and go. Nice, really cool. So also by adding a little bit of motion, you get a nice flow in your image. Now you might wonder, how do I get that lens flare so nice? Well, I cheat a little bit. I have a filter on my camera called a black diffusion filter, and it gives me a little bit of a lens flare. Let me first show you how it looks without. Okay, just look that way again. Very nice. And your eyes towards, yes, that's perfect. So this is without the filter. As you can see, we still have a little bit of blue, but then as soon as I put the filter on, you see that we have that really nice soft glow in the image. And this, for me, just gives a little bit more atmosphere. Okay, let's take a few more shots and then we're gonna go to the next set. I'm gonna shoot from a slightly higher angle, slightly lower angle, and I always love those lower angles. Can you hold the fan in front of your face and just look with your eyes over it? There we go, look at that. Nice. Awesome. Now if you want to enhance that a little bit, just move this light to the back, aim it towards our model to give a little bit of a backlighting, and look a little bit down that way. Perfect. Eyes towards me. Nice. Great. So as you can see, that blue gel now also works on the fan. So color, it doesn't only work as fill-in light or as emotion, but it can also give the whole set that blue hue. Talking about that blue hue, let's go for the next set, and then we're going to open up the shadows with some colors. This is one of the tricks that I absolutely love to do in almost every single shot. Okay, we're back in the studio with our beautiful model Eveline, and you remember when I told you guys I love red and blue, those two primary colors? Look at this, red and blue. We have a beautiful backdrop from Click Pro Backdrops, and of course we want to make sure that that backdrop really jumps out. Now you can use a big softbox to light everything flat, but that isn't really important, right? We want to make sure that we have contrast, that we have like a spot effect on our model. So that's why I'm using a strip light, and I'm actually angling that strip light all the way towards the backdrop to make sure that we get a little bit of light fall off on the backdrop and that you get a spot effect on our model. It's of course very important now to do the light metering correctly. We have to hold the light meter in front of the area we want correctly lit, and especially with these setups, if you do it wrong, you get a really blown out face and you don't want that. So we're going to hold the light meter in front of our model. There we go. And we're metering 5.62. So I'm a little bit above 5.6, so go down, 1, 2. So now I'm at 5.6. I'm ready to take the shot. But wait a minute. Every time you change your lighting setup, it's very wise to shoot the color checker. Now why is this? Now I'm using Hansel strobes and they're very, very reliable and they're also very constant. But still, if you use different modifiers, if you use different strobes, even if you change the output of your strobes, you can have a little bit of a difference in your color temperature. We don't want that, so for every single time we change our lighting setup, we're going to use the color checker, not the video one, we're going to use the photography one, of course. So, hold it in front of your face, as flat as possible, and aim it towards the light. So I'm at 5.6. So for the color checker, we have to make sure that we shoot it as flat as possible. So aim it towards the light. Hold your fingers away from the color checker. A little bit more aiming towards the light. There we go. And of course, make a funny face, otherwise the software won't work. There we go. Awesome. And this is our new reference point. Okay, let's start by shooting it straight on. And with this setup, it already looks awesome, I think. So there we go. Now look at this. You can really see a high contrast image. The only problem is the eyes are really dark, right? So with this setup, I really want my model to look straight into the light. There we go. Center your eyes a little bit towards me. There we go. This is nice. And this is a really cool setup because I can also shoot from this angle into the light and create a really nice high contrast image with a little bit of a vignette behind my model. Isn't that awesome? But you can also shoot it very flat. So how about this? More glamorous look. Nice. But what if we want a little bit more oomph in the shadows? Now, I have an umbrella here. And one of the nice things about the umbrella is that I can use a reflector inside with a red gel. And that's exactly what we did. So turn it on. And now we're going to open up the shadows with a little bit of red. Now you might wonder, how much red? I don't know. I really don't know. I always call this a little bit cooking with light. It depends on my mood, it depends on the model, and maybe it depends on the weather. I don't know. The main light we always meter and make sure that it's 100% correct. This one, I just wing it. I just place it on the setting that I like. So let's start with a little bit lower and let's see what it does for the shadows. Okay, stay that way. Nice. As you can see, I'm opening up the shadows just a little bit with red, but it's not enough. Look a little bit more towards the light if you want. Perfect. Nice. There's only a little bit of red hue, so let's open it up to, let's say, 1 stop more. Okay, there we go. Oh, I really like this. This is nice. Can you cross your legs? Cool. Now, of course, we can do the same trick. Shoot into the light. And now with the red gel, that really gives me something cool. Maybe a slightly lower angle, so we include the softbox. Can you cross your arms? Nice. Nose a little bit more towards me. Perfect. Look straight ahead. Nice. And of course, we can also shoot it flat. A little bit more here. And eyes towards me. And now that red really adds a little bit extra mood to the set for me. But personally, I really like it from this angle. Look towards the light again. Center your eyes. Look straight ahead. Good. But now we're shooting everything from this position. I'm a tall guy, so I'm not shooting from eyes perspective, just a little bit lower. Because if you shoot from a lower angle, your image becomes more powerful. But you also have nice leading lines in your image. Look at the backdrop. We have straight lines. What happens if I sit on the floor and shoot with a little bit more wide angle up? Yes, you get converting verticals. Something that you don't want in your landscape photography, or maybe you do. Something you don't want in architecture. Maybe you do. It's something that can really enhance a shot. In this case, let's see what happens. I'm gonna sit on the floor. I'm gonna aim the camera up. Look towards the light, there we go. I'm gonna use that backdrop to create a little bit more oomph. Now when I shoot it with a more longer lens, you get something like this. That's not really spectacular. But what if we go to the wide angle setting? Look at this. This I really like. Let's change the angle a little bit. And just crop out the softbox. It's barely in the frame. Nice. And also let's try a higher angle. Look here with your eyes. Nice. And low, just to show you the difference. And I think the lower angles just gives you that little bit of extra. But as you can see, that red gel really makes the difference between an okay shot and something that has a little bit more, well, emotion. Let's go back to Photoshop and let's see what we can do with these images in the retouch process. But first, Lightroom. Okay guys, I made my selection in Lightroom. I'm ready to retouch. But first, let's talk a little bit about something I'm not going to give a lot of attention to during this webinar. And that's actually skin retouching. Now I know there are a lot of plugins out there, and one of my favorites without any doubt is Luminar AI. It does a great job on skin. But you also have Portrait Pro, Portrait Professional, you have Image Normal Portraiture, you have Topaz. There are so many options out there for skin retouching. If you want to spend the money on it, I think Luminar AI is a great choice. It has a lot of extra options and of course the skin retouching. But let's say you are only using Lightroom, you don't want to spend any money on plugins, and you just want an easy fix for skin retouching. Let me first show you very quickly what you can do in Lightroom, because you might be shocked. You can actually do a lot in Lightroom with skin. So go to your local adjustments, go for your brush, and just make sure that everything here is on 0. And at this point, let's make the brush bigger, a lot bigger actually. And let's just start painting a mask. I'm only going to do a small part, so later on you can see when I start painting it in what the difference it is. Okay, let's go here. Okay, now the ones that are really important in this case are all the way here, presence. So the first thing I always do is texture all the way down. You can already see that the skin looks totally different now. Then we start lowering the clarity. And it actually takes out some of those shadow areas that are really annoying. And this of course looks terrible. It's almost like a Barbie doll. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring back the texture. But not too much. So find a balance point somewhere here. And now the cool thing is, after this you can really start retouching, and you can see the difference as soon as you paint. Look at this. And this is just in Lightroom, so no plugins, no extra stuff. Just the tools that you already get from Adobe. And I think it's pretty impressive. And I compare this to a few years ago when Lightroom was more like a storage device, and well, you could do some raw conversion in it, but it wasn't that spectacular. And when I look at what you can do now, this is literally amazing. Is it professional? Well, you determine that. I wouldn't be really ashamed if I delivered this to a client. Of course the plugins are better, but hey, it's not that bad. Okay, let's go to fit. And I only did this part, and now you can see a little bit better what you can do with dehaze, for example. If you have a model that has a lot of darker areas and lighter areas, dehaze can really come to the rescue by literally just changing the skin, as you can see here. It can also act a little bit like a phase light. Don't overdo it because this is insane, of course. but by just changing it a little bit, you can literally play around. Of course, you can still use your other stuff like highlights, or you can fill in your shadows. I'm making it worse now, but hey, you get the idea, right? And your contrast and your highlights. There we go. And as you can see here, it is a very, very nice solution in a Lightroom. But for now, let's just delete the mask. Let's do that on 100% so you can see what I did. There we go. Delete the mask. And there you are. Okay, so let's talk about colors. Okay, it's all about colors. So let's start with black and white. Sounds weird? Not really, because I want to show you some stuff later in Photoshop where it really helps to first understand how black and white works. So we're going to take this image and we're going to go for a black and white. And as you can see, all the color is gone. But there is still color there. You just don't see it as color. In other words, you can still change everything. And that you can actually find here in your black and white mix. As you can see here, you still see all the colors, and this might confuse some people, but a black and white image only takes out the saturation. It doesn't take out the coordinates or the intention of that color in the image, if you know what I mean. And let me just show you, that makes it a lot more easier. So everything that should be red in the image is still there, because if I do this, as you can see here, I can change the luminance of that color, although it's not a color anymore. And I can do the same for orange. So although I'm in black and white, I can still mix my image with, I always call this a color lighting. In other words, you can enhance certain areas of your image and you can make other areas disappear or just show up more. As you can see here, I'm testing which colors are in there. We have a blue backdrop, so I can make that dark, or I can make it jump out a little bit more. In this case, I want it a little bit darker. We have the purple and magentas also in the backdrop. Let's move that all the way down to make it more moody. And this is in the other backdrop, so let's turn that down too to get some structure on that side. And maybe add the red to the max. And the same with yellow. There you go. So we're using our channels actually to create a certain mood in our images. You could store this as a preset and, for example, call this open black and white, or maybe if you make it really dark, you can make it darker black and white or extreme, whatever you want to call it. But you can save this as a preset. And this is why it's so incredibly important to use that color checker and use that light meter. Because if your base is correct, you can use that preset in every single image and it will have exactly the same results. But this is nice. This is your black and white mixer. But how is this important when you start working in Photoshop or in Lightroom with color images? Well, you can also see under here your color grading. Now, in a black and white image, this actually gives you a little bit of a tint in your image. For example, let's go for a little bit reddish, if you like that. Of course, this is too much. And you can go here, for example, in a little bit more towards the blue. So as you can see, you can just, to your heart's content, change the look of your images just in a Lightroom. But let's talk about color, because this is the black and white version, but it's very important that you understand that even in black and white you can still use this. So let's jump into Photoshop with this image, and we're going to use the same techniques, but slightly different. Okay guys, we are in Photoshop, and although this image looks absolutely nice, sometimes you just want something else. And you know those fashion magazines where the models really jump out and you just go like, how did they do it? You try to do it with lighting and you just find out that with lighting it is possible, but not really. So there has to be some retouching done, right? Yes, absolutely right. In most cases there is a lot of retouching done. But as a photographer, I still believe that 99% of your images should be 100% in camera. In other words, shoot it as well as possible with lighting and then use Photoshop and Lightroom to give it that mood that you can't do with lighting or that is very difficult with lighting. But just try to come as close as possible with your images. In this case, I think we came really close. But let's say we want to add a lot of mood to the image, but I don't want to spend a lot of time in Photoshop. And this is the main reason why I already have the lens flare in, I already have the shadows right, and everything about this image I like. I could publish it like this. But let's just add that little bit of extra that will really make that image jump out and go like, wow. So, and it's actually pretty simple. Remember what we did with that black and white adjustments? Let's combine that with a color image. So go for layer, go for adjustment layer, and then choose your black and white adjustment layer. And just press OK. As you can see now, I have a black and white image, and that's pretty cool, right? Awesome, looks great. But hey, Frank, you promised color. Okay, let's go for color. Now, when you go into Photoshop, you know that you have different layers, right? We have the bottom layer, the background, and we have our top layer. In this case, it's a black and white adjustment layer. But there's also something else, and this is called the blending modes. And in all honesty, I don't know what they all do. I just always go through them and go like, okay, I really like this, or I don't like that. And then I will just choose the one that I like. In this case, I'm going to use one called soft light. As you can see, it makes the image pretty dark, but that's an easy fix. So what can I do with this adjustment? Because as you can see, it looks pretty dark on my original image, but it does have a certain look that I really like. This is where the part comes in which I just showed you in Lightroom. Although it's black and white, you still have all the elements of color in there. So you have your reds, your yellows, your greens, your cyans, your blues, and your magentas. So how does it work? Now watch this. Let's say we want to add a little bit of red. As you can see, on the arm it changes a little bit, but not too much. And that's because in this image there isn't a lot of red. But one of the things that I love about this image is that blue hue. And I also love the darkness over here. It really makes that image pop. So let's focus on the blues and let's see what we can do with this. Now look at this. And of course cyan also works on the hair, so I can make the hairs go darker or brighter. In this case I want to go really dark because I don't want to blow it out. And I like that really nice creamy quality of light here. So I'm actually opening and closing up my lens flare, as you can see. And this gives you a huge amount of adjustments in Photoshop. By just using that layer on the backdrop, I can make it darker or brighter, just depending on what I want. And I think actually a little bit is okay. Look at the difference. This is a huge difference, and it's just a simple solution. You can even use it as a, for example, an action. Just make an action and make everything like this, and then just start playing around with this. Or maybe you like the settings like this and just store it as an action. It's very easy to do in Photoshop. So, if working with a black and white adjustment layer in soft light is a great option to just enhance your images and make them pop a lot more. Of course, you can also do it in hard light or actually in vivid light. I don't really like this, to be honest. It's way over the top. But I think hard light and soft light both work very well. In hard light, I would probably just tone the effect down a lot. Like this, but in essence I just like that soft light version a lot more, so I'll just leave it on that. Okay, so a black and white adjustment layer really works. So what can we do more with images in color and color channels? So in the next image we're going to work with the color channels, and to show you guys that you can do something similar like this and give your image a lot of pop without using a black and white adjustment layer, but still using black and white. Okay guys, we are back in our Photoshop, and in this case I want to make sure that my image pops a little bit like the one with the black and white adjustment layers, but I want to do it a little bit simpler and a little bit easier. Now, when we look at how an image looks in Photoshop, but also how an image looks when you use a monitor, actually almost everything that emits light, you will find out that there are 3 channels that are used. And in this case, in digital system, and again with monitors or projectors, it's in almost all the cases red, green and blue. Sometimes they also add an extra color like yellow, but originally it should be red, green and blue. These are the primary colors. The secondary colors are cyan, magenta and yellow. And the secondary colors you find a lot in printers. And often they use black as K, CMYK. And black is not really there as a color, but more for the luminance of the colors. So CMYK are the colors that you use for printing, and black is actually determined to give your black point or the brightness of that color or the saturation, however you want to call it. So when I look at the channels, I can clearly see RGB, red, green and blue. So let's play around with these. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty layer, and I'm going to call that the red channel. Make sure, and this is absolutely vital, that you go back to your background layer. Go for channels, select the red channel, and on a Mac, Command A, on a PC it's Control A and Command C or Control C. Copy the channel and then go back to your layers. Make sure you're on the red layer and press Command V. There we go. So now we have the red layer. Okay, let's do that again, but now for a different one. So let's do a layer and let's call this a green. There we go. Again, go back to your backdrop, go back to channels, green, A and C, go back to layers, go in green, paste it in, there we go. Do another new layer and call this blue. And we do the same trick again, channels, go for blue, A, C, layers, and go for blue, V. Okay, there we go. So this is the original image. Let's start with the red channel. The red channel looks really, really nice, but it's black and white. And this is where I have to stop. It's not black and white. This is the red channel. You can compare it a little bit. It's not 100% the same thing, but with what Technicolor did. They also combined different colors and channels, and they messed around with everything, and they created some really, really stunning colors. Actually, my favorite kind of colors for movies. Just look at old Danny Kaye movies, and actually everything that was shot in Technicolor. It just looks absolutely amazing. So we're not going to create Technicolor. We're going to do it much, much simpler. So we're going to go for that red channel, but if you see now, it's only black and white. So I want to make sure that it becomes color. So go again to your blending modes. Don't we just love blending modes? And go again for soft light. And there you go. It's a little bit similar to what we did with the black and white adjustment layer, and that's logical because in essence it's the same technique. But this one is just a little bit more like a sledgehammer. It just works immediately. You don't have to fine-tune anything. This is it. If you want to dive more into the adjustments, I would probably go for the black and white adjustment layers. But this is a very, very simple, super easy fix, which you can actually write into an action, as you can see here. And it just works on a lot of images. The only thing I always change is the opacity. So you can go from 0 to hero again and just add the effect that you like. I really like this. Now this is the red channel. We can do the same thing for the green channel. Again, go for soft light and change the opacity to the point where you like it. I really like this. And we can do the same thing for the blue channel. Go for soft light and change the opacity again to what you like. Okay. Now when we compare them, you can see that there's a slight difference between all these different options. And that's the cool part. You can always choose which one you like most, or maybe you want to combine some. And maybe just change the opacity a little bit. Now, of course, there is more than soft light. You can also go, for example, if we take the red channel, for hard light, or go for this, which creates a little bit more of a comic book look. And you can go all the way, and you can, of course, tone the effect down just a little bit. It just depends on what you like. As I said before, it's similar to the black and white adjustment layer trick. I think with the black and white adjustment layer, you have just a little bit more control, but this is just such an easy fix to do. And the result is actually always absolutely amazing in images that are a little bit contrasty, but just need a little bit extra pop. So for the next image, we're going to use a similar technique, but then we're going to use color layers to give an image a really nice tint. Okay, let's take a look at this image, and I really like it. I like the backlighting, I like the lens flare. The only thing is, when I look at the image, I go like, maybe it should be a little bit more blue, or maybe it should be a little bit more red. I don't know yet, but in this case I think I'm gonna go for blue. So how do we make the whole image blue? Now, of course, you might say like, hey Frank, just go for adjustments, go for color balance. Oh, sorry. Go for a color balance, adjustments, and there we go. And just change everything towards blue. There you go. And although this looks like a nice solution, it's not the one that I want to show you guys. By the way, if you want to play with something like this, you can do the same trick again. Do an adjustment layer, and instead of the black and white, just do, for example, color balance in this case. Press OK. And of course, you can do the same trick again. Use soft light as an overlay, and then just start tweaking to your heart's content. But in all honesty, this part I never really use because I just like the black and white adjustment layer more, or the channel trick. So, but if you want to do it, it's just another piece in your arsenal that you can use. So let's do something else. And this is actually one of the first things I learned in Photoshop. And it might be an incredibly simple solution, but if you guys don't know about this, it really might open up some options. And if you do know about it, remember, this was the first trick I learned in Photoshop. So go for your paint bucket and choose a color that you like in your image. For example, here. Press Option to select. There you go. And just fill the whole frame with blue. There you go. Okay, now again, go for your soft light or your hard light or your vivid light or maybe your lighten or screen. It all depends on what you guys want. And maybe you like it way over the top like this, or you want to create something that's really out of this world. I can't imagine why, but hey, you never know. In my case, I'm going to use soft light and I'm just going to blend it in. So I'm going to do it very, very subtle. And there you go. And this again changes the whole look of your image. As you can see here, it really adds a lot of atmosphere, a lot of mood in your image. And it's an incredibly simple trick to do. But what if I want more? Again, as I said before, this was the first trick I learned in Photoshop. After this, I started experimenting a little bit more, and I found out that that trick works like a charm, but you can actually enhance it to something that's way nicer. So go for New Layer. And I have to add with this one, most of the images you see from me, let's say 99%, I didn't use this trick. I really used gels and lighting and whatnot more. But I always like to also know how you can create the effects that I do in camera in Photoshop. Because sometimes you shoot it without the gels and you go like, oh, I wish I should have shot it with gels, or the gels doesn't really cover the area you want in the perfect shot, and you just want to be able to add or enhance it yourself. So let's do that. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we have that empty layer. We're going to use a huge brush and we're just going to paint in effects. So in this case, I want blue on this side. It's a little bit laggy because I'm also recording. So there we go, blue. And of course, we also love red, right? So let's change this one to red. And there we go. And paint it in. Ooh, that's not red. This is red. There we go. Nice. Okay. And this looks a little bit weird, so let's blur the heck out of it. So let's do Gaussian blur. Make it a little bit more like what gels would do. There we go, overlapping. Really nice. And now comes the trick. Use this again as a blending mode. There you go. And now just change the opacity. And now it looks like you're shooting with two gels, as you can see here. Do it very subtle and the effect really jumps out. Now, if you want to add another gel, at this point I already created the look, so I can literally just paint in the effects that I want. Now, if you add a layer mask, and this is a nice thing about a layer masks with Photoshop, you can choose two things, reveal all or hide all. In this case, we're going to do reveal all, and this means show everything. As you can see here, we now have a white piece of canvas. If we paint on that white piece of canvas with a black brush, you will actually take the effect out, as you can see here. but I don't want to take the effect out. I want to lower the effect. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change the opacity of that brush to about 20%. And don't worry, you can do 21, you can do 25, 30. It doesn't really matter. It's a matter of taste and how much you want to take out or how many times you want to go over that area. So in this case, I just want to take it out very, very subtle. There you go, look at that. Same with the hands. And of course, this is way too much. So let's take that out there too. Nice. If you want a little bit more blue there, go back. This is important. I'm now on that layer to paint the effect in. I'm now going back to where the effect is. And this area I want a little bit more red. So let's paint that in. And in this case, let's up the opacity just a little bit. There we go. Nice. If you want to add another color, no problem at all. Let's try a little bit of yellow. I don't know if this fits, but it makes the fan look a little bit weird. So let's not do that. But maybe it looks nice on the backdrop a little bit here. Or you can use it on the face. No, on the face we don't want it. As you can see, I'm just experimenting, and yellow, not really my color. So let's take that out again. But you can do so much with that layer. Again, this is soft light. You can go for hard light, which in my opinion is way over the top for these kinds of effects. But one that really seems to work very well is sometimes screen. Now with screen, we have to turn it all the way down. But you can sometimes in images where there is a lot of color, screen works like a charm because it's very, very aggressive if you turn it all the way up. But you can really just blend it in a little bit, and it makes it a little bit softer than the soft light version. But again, it's very, very subtle. I hope you can see that on the video. This is more intense than screen, and just choose what you like. And that's the nice thing about having all those blending modes. You can just pick whatever you like and just go with your heart's content in retouching in Photoshop. So you can see here, it really, really looks nice. And the cool thing is, I can still do all the tricks with, for example, the red channel. Just copy that on top and go all the way down. And then just add that red channel in a little bit. There we go. So compare that to the original image. And you can see that it's a huge difference. This is just the red channel and this is with the colors in. Okay, I think that really, really shows what you can do in Photoshop with colors, and you don't need any plugins for this. You don't need anything that's difficult. You just use the tools that are in Photoshop, but just in a slightly, I think, smarter way by using the blending modes and of course understanding how the colors work, how the black and white works, how your channel masks work, but most of all, how you can blend them together. So let's go back to the studio for the conclusion. Hey guys, thank you so very much for watching, and thank you Calibrite of course for hosting this session. I hope you enjoyed working with colors, also the retouching part, and you see the importance of calibrating your monitor. And do remember, color evokes emotion, so always think about which color you're going to use, which backdrop you're going to mix it with, and also use that trick to just open up the shadows a little bit with some color. It really gives a whole lot of oomph to your images. Thank you so very much for watching guys, and see you again next time. Bye bye.